Cool, thanks, Joanna. My name's Graham, I'm a recovered addict. I was thinking on the way here about what section to start with and what reading, and I think that those descriptions of husbands number 1 to 4 are quite useful ones in terms of, I was thinking about when I was younger and sort of how things were at the beginning, if you like, maybe between the age of sort of 19, 20, kind of as a demonstration of really that, from what it's describing there with husband 2, that it was like I was already doomed while I was in that category, if you like. And I remember having conversations either with my parents, with my girlfriend at the time, with my sister especially, who used to come back from university and find me in various states, and I remember times even 19, 20, maybe 21, where I'd decide I was going to stop because I could see that I always got out of control, and and even then it seemed like it was like I could sort of see that I couldn't moderate. But what would always happen, as they describe there, is that once I'd got over that spree, whether that was a couple of days or a couple of weeks, once again I'd think that there has to be a way of being able to moderate this. That they talk about on page 32 about they say, though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. And and that was definitely the case. I didn't want to stop. I wanted to know and work out the way in which I could control it somehow, and, which is described in chapter 3. So, which if anyone in the room hasn't read, I strongly suggest you do. The idea that I could control and drug my drinking was my great obsession, and that's been the case right since it started, which is quite interesting, because I think for some, then it's not that necessarily their experience. It's like it seems to come in maybe later in life. I think it makes the whole problem even more confusing. But that was definitely the case for me. So when I was 15, 16, I started smoking weed and drinking simply because that's what other people were doing. And the fact that, I suppose I did have some difficulties as a child. School wasn't particularly happy times for me, but it wasn't like I thought, I've got to sort of get out of this and escape this. I don't remember it being like that. It was just, I just went and did it. There was no reason to suspect that. I guess, 22 years later, I'd be sitting here talking about this, definitely not. And it was all right for a while, but I think, within 6 months or maybe a year, I remember being in my room, caning bongs, night after night after night after night, and knowing that, so what was like 16, 17, this is already like, I've got no control over this. I don't think I'd started drinking yet, but that was, eventually it became the same with alcohol, to a lesser extent with cocaine and stuff, which came in later years. But the evidence that everybody around me, my family, and the effect that alcohol and drugs had on me was really apparent. Like I said, those conversations you used to have when I was younger. The lack of control, like, Graham, what are you doing? And I guess going back to the part I was reading where they talk about, that they believed that they could have stopped when they were younger, like who knows? And then they go on to talk about the man of 30 who, saw how out of control he was and made up his mind to stop, and that was an unusual thing for them, which is why they put that in. This is unusual. This guy seemed to be able to do this. But yeah, all I had at that stage was this absolute obsession that I had to find a way of controlling it, and I tried everything in order to do that. So through the years, episodes of psychosis, my drinking got heavier and more frequent. I remembered recently, and this is interesting, I didn't even remember this until maybe a few weeks ago, of swearing off in my mid-20s, so that started a long time ago. Once again, though, I would still, and maybe it lasted like longer than it used to when I was younger, but I'd always end up absolutely sure that there had to be a way of controlling it again. Drug and alcohol services then, I remember going to talk to them. I don't really remember what happened, but I remember I was kind of reaching out, but what I know now is that the real desire to accept any kind of help wasn't there. And I guess going through my mid-20s into the last decade or so, this, I've ripped through 2 families, at least 3 children, of which the consequences are severe for myself, for my family, for all the ripple effects on all of the other families involved. It's made my family extremely ill, and that's all that's ever happened. So it's about 20 years of that, really, repeatedly. So I want to talk about now. I'm going to talk about a few relapse experiences, and so that was the pattern of how things were, which within a family environment was just it was disastrous. It was like, I don't know how the family, the relationship I was in, trying to bring up children in those circumstances. I don't know how. Like the number of times that the shit hit the fan, and we'd kiss and make up. I talk about it in the chapter to wives. Things would be all right for a while, and then it'd all blow up again. It's like it happened so much. Yet, I'd sort of seem to be able to build things up just at least a little bit or enough to sort of repair them before, smashed it all to pieces again. And this went on. This went on continuously, and it wasn't until the age of 34 when I finally realised that I couldn't take the first one, and then the problem was then that I didn't know what I was suffering from. So, and I thought because I now wanted to stop, that would be enough. I had no reason to suspect that my willpower, wouldn't work, and just without going into too much detail on them, 3 significant, or 4 actually, significant demonstrations of that, of the relapse, of the mental twist which I'd acquired, I don't know when, but a very long time ago, which was showing itself now that I actually wanted to stop. And so one of those occasions was so moved into a new house with my wife and the family, my 2-year-old son, my 2-month-old son, and we decided somehow between us it'd be a good idea to christen the move with a few drinks, and I got smashed in it, and I was just back to the same old tricks. The same morning, my ex-wife woke up, and I remember swearing off that morning, and then I went out that night to go to the chippy, to honestly go to the chip shop down the road. I drove there, and then I did the same thing again that night. and it was the same old thing which always happened, which was me getting arrested, basically. And that was the end of that relationship. And then this time I'm like drying out with my parents, and I get to 40 something days, and I managed to keep hold of my job, which is something that one that I clung on to for 15 years, and I don't know how I did it, but in some ways it was a bad thing to happen, because it kept me in some kind of, it was like I everything else is going wrong, but I've still got the job, and it's like I feel like I'm kind of all right still, and it's like, no, nothing could be further from the truth. And anyway, so I'm with mum and dad for sort of maybe 4.5, 5 weeks, and absolute fierce determination, to never do this again. And if I hadn't meant the others, I definitely meant this one. I believe I have meant some of the others, but yeah, this is really, I really remember how honest that desire was, and so I've got a room in a shared house, my marriage is in everything's in a wreck, really, so I can't say I'm feeling particularly good. I'm not really, but nonetheless, I've got the room in the shared house, I've still got my job, and I go back home, and then I relapse the same night. I can't really remember the sort of the kind of how I felt or anything at the time, but that's that one. And I sort of, lots of periods of stopping and starting during that year, which was 2016, and then towards the end of that year, just shy of 4 months, during which time things had improved a bit. I was feeling better, and I was sort of doing what it seemed like a lot of other people were doing. I was going to loads of meetings, and we could go to a meeting every night, and talking about what was going on and all of the stuff, and I seemed to be all right, and it seemed to be like this. This was going to be, this was going to sort of do the trick, and I was going to be okay. And then the same thing happened again. That brought me to the end of 2016, by which time everything that was already bad has been really smashed to pieces, even worse than it was before. And at that point, someone took me to my first CA meeting in London, which I'm really grateful for, because that's ultimately led to the things that have to me being here, really. I guess probably wouldn't have happened if that hadn't been the case, and that led to going through the steps, and with the desperation of a drowning man, as it describes in the book, and I definitely had that, and I guess it talks about it in chapter 3 with let's just find it. Yeah, with Fred on page 39. So he where is it? I can't find the bit I was going to talk about, but I was aware of I'd after 6 months with one sponsor, so there was a guy out of this meeting in London who'd sponsored me. I then had I got a different sponsor, and I'd gone through the work again, and I'd acquired quite a lot of knowledge about the first step and things that we talk about in these meetings all the time. And looking back on that now, it's like it appeared to give me some kind of it was like I thought I was going to be all right, because I really knew what was wrong with me, in a way, in quite a lot of detail, and but I guess all I can really say is that the frightful day came when I drank again, as it says in Bill's story. And then that takes me through. So that was last summer, and fortunately, and I think it's a good time to talk about 14 minutes. Okay, I'll start wrapping it up soon. It's a good time to talk about the importance of fellowship, and really because of some of the people in this room that I know, and people who stayed in touch with me when that happened, that frankly, told me to get out of my flat and come here, and I did. Thank goodness that happened, and thank goodness I left my phone on. Some people turn them off and bugger off, and they never come back, do they? Thank goodness that happened, and this time I'd never been into a treatment centre before. I really needed an intervention this time. It was showing no signs of stopping. It was like, as much as I sort of being in the spree, it was like as desperately as I tried to get out of it, I just couldn't. And really, that's, I guess we're going into husband 3 and 4, if you like, with the things that it describes there that Nick was reading. Thank goodness I managed to get into a treatment centre, and that did break the cycle. And then when I came out, I got a sponsor, and and I had the absolute desire to go through with this work again. I haven't found it easy though, and I just want to finish by talking about step 6 and 7. Really, the things which have happened as the consequences really of suffering from what we've come to believe as this relapse condition, which has happened over and over again, more times than I could count. They're heavy, they're bad, I find it hard to accept that I can't see my children. I really do. It's tough, and that's put me in a lot of pain. And I have to constantly. Well, it's step 3 too. Absolutely, it's step 3. Where am I playing God with this situation? It tells us in here that we have to stop doing that, and and I wish it was as simple as okay, so I'm just going to quit playing God. Great. It's like, but it keeps cropping up, and it's like, and I find I'm doing it again, and and I have to, I have to be continually looking at, where not only where I'm playing God, but the willingness to actually have, when these things crop up with them, the willingness to have God remove those things from me. It's not easy, and it's sometimes it's a daily thing, and ask for, really asking for some sincere help with that. And at times that's had me on my knees by my bed in tears, saying these prayers, absolutely. And the other thing is that if I'm not constantly looking at those things and, other decisions which based on self, which I make, which put me in pain, I'm not going to go into details about what they are, but I'd be more than happy to have a one-to-one conversation with someone about what those things are, where I'll try to make myself feel better, and, this will do it and that will do it. And I don't want to look at this. It's like, but I have to look at those things, and I do, and so I do the inventory when it comes up, and I discuss those things with my sponsor, and we talk about them, and then next week we talk about them again. It's like kind of like that, really. One thing's for sure: if I don't do that, I'm not going to be in a position to be helpful to anyone else. And to finish it off, that is what this program's for. Perhaps I used to be under the impression that these steps were something we take in order to prevent relapse from happening, but I don't know if that is what I used to think, but it's certainly not what I think now, and and it's definitely not what it describes in here. It's talking about taking these steps and helping somebody else, and wanting to as well, which I probably don't all the time, but most of the time I do, and it is a pleasure to be of service, and I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. Okay, thank you, Graham. So I'll open up the floor for everyone to share back. Thank you.